Hello, everyone. Ryan Scott here again. I'm the lead columnist for D3Hoops.com. And with me today is Lynn Hersey, as you can see in the Zoom window, the head coach at Smith for basketball. And we don't say women's basketball because Smith is a women's only college. They are the basketball team at Smith. Thanks for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thanks so much for having me, and really appreciate all the effort you put into the coverage of our sport. So, thank you.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, your teams seem to always consistently perform maybe I don't want to say above expectations because I'm sure you have expectations for them that go beyond what they can do. But like what we see and what we think about when we look at the team, seems like you're always really at the peak of performance. And I wanted to ask a little bit about that. And maybe just to start off, what do you think are the essential elements for a team to be able to just consistently perform at or above their expectations?
Yeah, I mean that's a loaded question. I think there's so many sort of facets to building a program and kind of expanding your culture, expanding your expectations. Um, and I inherited a team that was 4-21 here, and so in terms of like the journey to where we have become a three-time Final Four team and been to national championship games. I mean, it expands on a lot of different like facets of sort of figuring out what's really important, what really works. And I would say the first thing is that um, I'm a big believer in like just such a important um, lifeblood of the sport is the recruiting and making sure that you get student athletes that really identify and align with like your vision, your culture, um, all the intricacies that go into building a team and building the mindset and the culture. And you can identify a lot of that in the recruiting process if you are sort of invested in it to that type of depth and the dynamics of it all. So I would say the first thing for me is always like how much we push recruiting wise, and sort of making sure we identify the right people to join our family and our group. And then from there, I mean, it's ultimately, I think a big thing, especially for women, is that you have to like believe in what you want to achieve, right? You have to talk about it. It can't be this unseen, unfelt sort of vision. It has to be something you know, that you don't run from, you run toward, right? And it's something you live in every single day. So, there's a lot of elements to that, right? And that could be we're talking about just setting the expectations of the program, right? And for us now, it's getting to a national championship game. I don't think anything below that really feels very satisfying to our program, right? So, we're taking a look at what our expectations are now. A lot of that is every group that comes through, it's having them sort of absorb that mindset and get used to it and get ready for the pressure, get ready for the expectations. And you do that with daily practice. This isn't something that like just happens, right? By mistake. It's intentional. It's how you practice. It's what you emphasize as a head coach. It's in the individual meetings you have with your players. It's in the captain's meetings you have. It's really building this belief in this sort of really identifiable like sort of point of attack for your team. And so I think that's a really big one. Obviously, depending upon where your program is, there's always something to go get, and there's always something to go, strive for. So, it's just making sure you all have your entire, culture running toward it. And you have to identify the things that could get in the way and making sure that you're communicating about what that might look like, right? Like competition within your program, or the pressure of it, or sort of like the ability to manage roles and communicate really well with how the program is going to be run. So I think those things are really very critical. I think another thing is that you really need just a really steady work ethic, and one that is where your goal is really to outwork your opponents, right? And that's from the head coach all the way down to our trainer, and it's just a culture of, we're in the gym more, we're getting more shots up, our practices are, with a level of intensity and focus and execution, expectation. And, once that becomes part of what you do every single day, the habits come with it. And those are, I think, really big parts of trying to draw the most out of the student athletes you have, and really challenging their competitive mindset and their ability to like see the growth that they're going to have, but also, sort of understand that that's what you fall back on when things get pressure filled and things get more intensified, right? It's the body of work of an entire season, not the prep of 2 days before a game, right? So I think that's another thing. And then I also think you need something that grounds you. And here at Smith, we do a really deep dive into gratitude. It is something that I believe I try to practice it myself, but I think having it be part of the culture and the identity and the mindset of an entire program is really grounding to us. So we extend gratitude in all these different ways. We have a Playmakers Club, which has over 200 little girls K through 8. And we do programming with them probably, 9 times during our season. It's a lot of effort and a lot of time on our part, but it is giving back to the community, and it is, soulful for us. So that's one example. We also send gratitude texts on Fridays to the people in our worlds, and we do it every single Friday. And it's really trying to just maximize the moment that you're in and tell somebody in your world how you feel about them, right? And those are the things that balance the competition, that balance the like intensity of execution, that balance all these other things you're striving for. And I think every program needs something, that the players, the coaches really buy into and can be a very a grounding part of the hustle of everything else.
Yeah, it's so my next question is about some preparation stuff, which is funny that you answered like my next three questions in your first answer, which is yeah, always ahead of time. One of the things we've noticed about your program is that even though you may graduate like some really talented high level players that don't come along every day, you're really prepared to have the next group step in
Yeah.
and fill those shoes. What are you doing intentionally to prepare your players to step into those moments when obviously you can't have them in them till they're there, right? Yeah, you have to have them
Yeah.
ready and to perform in those moments. How do you go about that intentionally?
Yeah. I mean, I to be really honest, like the purpose behind it is trying to build a championship program this year while building next year's at the same time. Right. And I think I think this goes back to the recruiting when we're recruiting, so we have enough depth in our program, to really compete every day in practice. And essentially, technically, you have enough talent where a lot of kids who are coming off the bench for you could start at many other places, right? Then, it's coaching both groups with the same standards and the same sort of purpose and the same type of like time commitment and investment in the individual parts of, your roster, right? And then, and in turn, then that then creates the team sort of, coaching that you're doing as well, right? I don't think you can coach the whole without coaching the parts. And, ultimately, I think we just spend a lot of purposeful time in how we organize our practices, how competitive they are, how much we do end of game scenario, like situational basketball, how much that's ingrained into what we do. And so someone who is maybe a role player this year has a lot of practice doing a lot of things that is required of them to then step into that next big spotlight role and feel prepared to perform right off the bat for us, right? And I think that's just it's a vision of how the staff here at Smith operates, how we sort of seek out, sort of maximizing our entire roster. And I do think that that has a huge payoff for, the next year, and who's ready to kind of, step into these really major roles. under pressure, right?
Uh,
And I
sure.
think we've done pretty well with that.
How much do you focus on some of those end games? I would be remiss. Back at the beginning of the season, I talked to Brad Fisher at Oshkosh, and obviously we talked about some of the
Yeah.
matchups you guys have had in the
Yep.
playoffs. And he said, the first time I got out coached, and then I worked harder, and I thought we were
Yeah.
all prepared, and then I got out coached again. And it was talking about those end game scenarios and how your players were ready, and you had extra plays that were drawn up beyond what they had prepared. And he just said it's motivation to get better. But how much time do you spend on those things to be able to execute in those moments?
My personal philosophy is it to expect someone at our level, right, to execute a brand new set in footwork into a shot that maybe they haven't practiced or seen before in under a massive spotlight, make that shot is not really fair to the student athlete in my mind, right? So for me, we have an end of game package, and we have almost every scenario that we can think about, and like we train for it throughout the course of the entire year. It's not, not something that is just a 30-second timeout. Hey, can we pull this off? Right? Because the percentages of doing that are probably not super higher in your favor. So yeah, we practice all game scenarios, being down, being up, um, fouls to give, low shot clock, high shot clock, end of game slobs. And then we are really pretty prepared in knowing our opponent's habits as well. And we try to make sure we're really aware of those as coaches. That's our job to help our players get prepared for those moments too, right? So I think there's, a lot of work that can be done, situational basketball. And it's a matter of prioritizing it, in terms of you're going to be in those situations. So, the more that your players feel really confident in their shots and in the execution of the sets is, probably, 75% of that set, right? So we just try to really focus on that.
Yeah. What do you how do you balance the short term and the long term? You see all these coaches and players that talk about just next game up, next game up. I'm not thinking past the next game, which I think is probably important mindset when you're in the scheme of things. But if you're not thinking ahead, at least in terms of planning, right, you're not doing your job. So how do you balance that with the players both thinking about long term goals and the short term performance?
Yeah, well, you learn as you go, right? And, as Brad said, I'm grateful our matchups have luckily fallen our way. But I've had some before, this time period where they didn't fall our way, right? And that really pushed me. And in theory, obviously, losing two national championship games, like you got to find a way to close the gap. And how are you doing that, right? And it does make you, think way beyond your conference. It makes you think way beyond your, how you're crafting your conference schedule, right? There are things that you got to do differently. And, I'll give an example. Like it's really hard to prepare for NYU last year on a 90-minute NCAA practice, and you get a short window to get ready for your semis, and you're playing a really good team. And, you got to invest your time in just getting to the next game. And then you get 90 minutes. And when that opponent isn't doing something fairly conventional, and I would say like NYU last year did like obviously the run and jump was a bread and butter of them. And that's not something you see every day. You're not practicing for that. Maybe one or two other teams are doing that throughout the course of the year. Well, it's again, it's difficult to get that 90-minute window and figure it all out. So, for us, it's like, all right, well, we got to close this window. Well, how are we going to do it? Well, maybe we need to be looking at, what the top teams in the country are doing right now, a while ago, and figuring out what are the things that we need to prepare ourselves for and chip away at it over a long span of time, right? So if we're working, if I could rewind time and we were working on the jump trap for 2 months in
Yeah.
preparation, I would feel a lot better about that matchup, right? And so it's learning as you go, and it's really trying to like, I think stretch how you do your allotment of time with your players, and stretch your staff, and how are we taking in the information that is not just right in front of us with our conference? And that's important, obviously. But it's also about like if you're planning to do something bigger in an NCAA run, you got to be thinking about what that might look like, right? And I think it's a critical part of coaching to be able to coach for the future while coach for the here and now. And it's a craft to really allot your time accordingly. And then it's a buy-in from your team, right? Because they're young 18 to 22 year olds. They want the instant gratification of things, right? Like my next game is the worry, right? And you're trying to balance that with also putting in things in place that, or maybe 2 months down the road and may never happen, right? So, it's a little bit of a balance there.
How much do you put on the players in that situation, and how much is the coaching staff? Like, I know I'm sure the coaching staff is watching tons and tons and tons of video ahead of time. Are you giving your players video to watch and saying, "Hey, we want to work on this, even though we might not see this team until March," or are you waiting on that and that's mostly coaching prep?
Yeah, I think I think you have to know your team. And I think you got to know what their, bandwidth is. We are pretty ingrained in preparation here. We have endurance to prepare. That's probably one of our superpowers, is the endurance in terms of the preparation. And I think when we are really bought into that, it's proved to be a really good resource and tool for us for success. So I'm just trying in the ways that I am learning as a coach to bring that into our entire body of work over the course of an entire season and see how, much that sort of adds dynamic, like a depth and a dynamics to our guard group, our post group, our situational end of game, our practices, and we'll see how it plays out. I don't know if I have a straight up answer for you yet on this one, but
Oh, that's
um,
fine.
I do think that I like what we're doing, and I think you got to kind of plan for the things you have gaps in, and you do have quite a few months of basketball to be chipping away at it.
Sure. One of the things I've noticed from really successful teams is the ability to kind of move on from setbacks, both in game and after game, and do it quickly, right? Are there some ways that you prepare for that? Is that something you're really looking at in recruiting for resiliency? Like, how is that something learned, I guess, or is that something you really try to identify in the player themselves that's kind of got to come naturally?
I think it's a tone of your program. I think it's what your leadership group, coaches, captains, whoever teams do it, what they emphasize, what the mindset is that you're building throughout the course of the year. I'm really good. I feel really good about sitting in the mess. I think a lot of teams don't sit in the mess enough, right? And not in terms of like, you know, sort of like you need to like make it so that certain things in your program are felt, not just seen, not just heard. And when you feel things, it's a different level of drive and passion and edge to either recreate those things or make sure something doesn't happen again, right? So I mean, I don't know what's more difficult to get through than two national championship losses in 2 years,
Right.
right? But you have a lot of different ways you can go about that. And in reality, I think you learn a lot from and you mature as a program from sitting in it and not running from that, and having good leadership to bring you through it. Um, and I think that that's, kind of where character and the resilience, all these things we all talk about, as a coach, I think you have to be role modeling what that actually looks like. So
And yeah, in a sense, you have to deal with it, even if it's a little tougher in the moment, which helps you better prepared to deal with it down the road, right? Is that kind of what I'm hearing you're saying?
yeah, and it builds the like again, it builds a skill set in your mind, right? It builds a skill set for the entire group, and I think all we're trying to do through this world of basketball is really prepare our young women to be the most battle tested, adaptable, best problem solvers, like, risk takers, they own what they're good at type of mentalities, right? And you're just preparing them for like the life challenges that are coming. And we're using this little world of basketball to help, instill these really, I think, very important sort of examples that they can draw upon when they move on. So something gets hard, you can't fear that. You got to be sort of willing to do hard things well, right? And when things are going well, like it's great to, sort of be grateful for the things that are kind of aligning in your life at that moment, right? So do
Sure.
do the hard things well and be grateful when things are going good for you and your team.
Um, where do you see the balance between the work you're doing in terms of like mental game, focus preparation, and the actual X's and O's? I feel like I'm seeing coaches a lot more, especially at the highest level, expecting the players to come in with an ability to process the X's and O's, right? They play in so much AAU. Like there's a real expectation that like they should be able to get some of that stuff down. And the real battle now is the focus, the mental part of it, the work ethic, that kind of thing. How much do you balance just like straight teaching basketball with the mental part of the game?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And also, I think every team's a little different, right?
Sure.
So, I think it's kind of gauging and meeting your team where they are. And what is it that this group needs more support in? And what parts are they really already, ahead of sort of the curve, right? In terms of understanding the game, the IQ, the culture, all the parts that go into being a really well balanced program. So I would say it's team dependent, but I don't know if there's ever been a year where I haven't felt like all of those things needed to be part of a really important focal point for our coaching staff and our leadership team, right? So and that might be too that you're not just trying to get your like all-American there, you're trying to get your 16th player to the same
Right.
point, right? And I guess again, it's philosophical a little bit and how you're developing the entire roster at the same time, right? So I would say those things are pretty ingrained in every day for us.
Talking about the school and the athletic department, as you mentioned, the record when you took over was not super great, and you have obviously improved that quite a bit. From the outset, it doesn't look like there was any sort of like major philosophical change or lots of extra funding that came in, that the school's kind of doing the same sort of things. What was set up in the structure you were able to take advantage of or maybe influence to go from 4 wins to 24 wins?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the big thing for us is we're the largest women's college in the country. And we're the birthplace of women's basketball. So we have two really identifiable parts of who we are that are very unique and really are not, can't be compared with really many other schools that we compete against in Division III. So it's about understanding, like, what makes you different, what makes you elite, what makes you sought after, and really trying to embrace those brands to be honest with you, and building them up to be something that is pretty special and different. I love that I coach at a women's college. I mean, I'm a product of co-ed all the way through. I love being here. I have two daughters, 9 and 7, and I really believe in like the power of what we're doing here to elevate women and to build a mindset that is very competitive, for them to be able to utilize that when they leave and they take on all the different interests they have in their careers. But I think Smith is a special place because it merges, our weight room is made for women, right? We have all the
Yeah.
equipment is for our hands grip size, right? It's not for the 6'8", linebacker, right? It's made for the specifically for the student athletes who come here to compete, right? We don't share the gym. We've got a gym entirely to ourselves. There are some real innate and special parts of being part of the Smith experience. In my mind, that trumps a lot of the Division III experience for women elsewhere.
Yeah.
We pack the stands every day. Like there's, our gym is filled with the community, and we have, our players are playing in front of a sold out crowd every day, right? Like that doesn't happen on the whole. So we've created something here that is unique and special, and we have made it part of who we are and what our identity is. And when we recruit, like these are the things you're going to hear from me that make us different and our experience different. So I think that's really unique to Smith. I also feel a responsibility being a head coach at Smith to do things differently and not to be a cookie cutter coach. And I really pride myself on all of those things. So, for an example, we try to have these DNA sessions throughout our season. And like one thing I think women need to get better at is negotiating contracts. I think that
Okay.
is part of like your
Yeah.
overall swag and ability to be confident and know your worth and all these different things. So, I set up, I get our alums involved who are lawyers, and we have a whole, sort of session with them about how to negotiate contracts. Does that have anything to do with basketball? Not at all, but it has everything to do with our mindset, right? It
Yeah.
has everything to do with like how we're building our players up. And I think those types of unique things that we sprinkle into our program, because I feel like we have a responsibility to make this women's college experience the best experience in Division III. That's, that those are the things that are the extra things we try to tackle here. But I do think it makes a huge difference in a lot of how our players view themselves and how much they believe in themselves as competitors.
Yeah, my wife's one of her cousins is a graduate of Smith there, and you can just kind of see a different kind of mindset and motivation coming out of there. It's unique, and I mean, you explained it well. It would have been hard for me to describe. I do have one last question that's a little bit more about the team. Scott Peterson would be upset if I didn't ask this. You got Hannah Martin back, one of the best players who
Yeah.
who missed a bunch of time, and he, looking into the numbers and the deeper stats, was saying, they're not performing as well since she's been back as they were before. How difficult is it to reintegrate someone who's, I assume it's, the minutes that she's playing now are not the same minutes that were replacing her before, right? So that she's got the ball a lot more, she's playing differently. How hard is it to integrate somebody like that who's got such a high usage rate and such important to the team after you've been used to playing without her?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big thing here is that, you're not going very far without your preseason All-American, right?
Yeah.
And, I think that the goal of the coaching staff right now is, in putting her back into the scenarios that she's very familiar with. I mean, she was a first-year point guard here and brought us to a national championship, right? This is all
Right.
she knows. All she knows is 2 years. This is her third season, two national championships, right? So think about the experience. Think about the minutes gained, the leadership she's gained, just it's just a lot of value to our program. And then coming back from an injury where you're really not allowed to do anything for the entire semester, it's just going to take a little time, right? And the last two out of the last three games, she's had really massive games for us. And I believe in this guard group. I believe in Hannah. And we're gonna find our groove. And I'm in some ways I'm kind of glad we haven't peaked yet, right? And
Right.
you know what? I find that there's a special spot to peak, and we're sort of on track for that. So, hopefully we peak at that moment when I feel like that's where we should be playing our best. But Hannah's a huge part of that, and she's going to bring us right where we need to be. And the team's rallied around her, and we have other players who gained really valuable minutes when she was out. And that's just going to instill a lot more confidence in the roles that we have of the other guards who played. So, a silver lining in that, although something difficult to manage, and we survived it, and now we're gonna try to turn it on at the right time.
Yeah. And then this can be a quick answer because I kind of think I know what it is, but any thought to like legacy? Like if you guys make the Final Four this year, that's four in a row. I think you'd be only the fourth team ever to have done something like that. Is there any is there any part of this that thinks about what's behind? I assume you're pretty focused
Yeah.
on just games and doing as best you can.
Yeah. I'm unique like that. I'm a little different. I love like legacy. I love leaving your impact. I love chase history, right? I love challenging every team here to be a team that is welcome back as a Hall of Fame team here at Smith, right? I think those things are what bond a team. I think it is what makes one team different than the next team, than the next team. So if we're fortunate enough to have four teams go to, four straight Final Fours, every team would be different. Every team would own something that they have done really well that maybe another team hadn't done, right? And I think I believe that is part of the mindset of building a program that thinks they can win the whole thing, right? And if you don't have your sight on or set on, trying to achieve that legacy or trying to achieve that greatness, obviously this team's goal is to try to win the whole thing. We haven't had a team do that yet. We have a lot of silver, not a lot of gold. So one of the things we talk about, I mean, that's again what I was meaning early on. Like, if I'm not talking about it, you know, that's a really that kind of leaves a lot of question marks in everybody's head. So,
Sure.
we talk about it a lot and we work hard toward it, and to your point, I think a legacy is something to be really to fight for, and really be vulnerable, put yourself in vulnerable situations to achieve it, fight for it, and believe in it. So, yeah, four would be nice. We're going for six in our conference, and that would be, I think, the most any team has won in basketball. Five, we're tied right now with Babson, but so that would be another thing, right? That would be something unique and different to win six straight there. So, there are these little things that are the markers along the way, and I think it does define someone's like focus and competitive spirit to go chase it.
Well, thank you so much for your time. This is really valuable and really interesting stuff, and we'll be rooting for you the rest of the way.
Yeah, I appreciate your time as well, and again, the investment in our game, and but really appreciate the opportunity to talk more about what we do over here.